Hi, I'm Chancellor from Be Your Purpose Coaching. I'm an NLP trainer and an NLP coach. And as I always say, I love to work with people all over the world to live a life of empowerment. Today, I want to explore what is judgment. Because when you understand what is going on with the dynamic of judgment, it gives you better choices and it can actually free yourself from the angst and the anxiety of what judgment does to us. In a nutshell, judgment can really hold us back. Somebody else's judgment of you can really impact your future success. So it's absolutely important to get in touch with what is going on. I'm going to open up my slides here and talk about judgment in far more in depth. So, you know that feeling like, ouch, someone said something or somebody did something and it was that kind of judgment from somebody that you trust that really stopped you in your tracks. Immediately you feel your energy kind of withdrawn and your body pulses with heat, and it's like, did I hear that correctly? It's that pang of hurt that causes that confusion. Like, do I call them out on their what they just said, or am I going to be called a drama queen? Our minds are meaning making machines. They are going to put a meaning to somebody's judgment. They are going to, it's going to label it right or wrong. And we need to understand how our bodies have gone from, walking on your merry way to suddenly there's that reactive response. Somebody said something, did something, and it stopped you in your tracks. So let's explore this deeper. Everything that we experience is filtered and organized through the filters of our mind. The mind will instantly want to categorize something as right or wrong. And immediately, even when you open up this video and saw me, there was this immediate judgment, and that's completely fine by me, whether you judge me to be right, wrong, the colors that I wore, sound of my voice, the mind will automatically put a judgment on it. And so it depending on your response to other people's judgments can either be detrimental or it can hold you back. So yeah, anyway. So let's unpack this as I've said before. In this video, I do want to cover why did I attract this judgment, how I can clear this unsettled feeling in my body. I want to talk about judgment and how that interacts with the spirit world and the best way to move forward. I'm not necessarily talking about jumping straight into forgiveness. There needs to be processes and understandings before you can actually let go of that judgment. The pattern of judgment starts with childhood. So first, I want you to think back to when you were little and the types of judgments, conditions, the rules that you received about how you should be in this world. Thinking back to your childhood, like who made the decisions growing up? Like, were you allowed to have input into the decisions, or did you have to fight to get what you want? Possibly were you even like a people pleaser and you just suppressed what you wanted and just went along with what everybody else wanted? The question is, though, if you had to fight for what you wanted, were you judged if you got that decision wrong? Perhaps you were shamed for not doing enough or being enough. The perfectionist in this world, a recovering perfectionist here, can recognize that, there was this need to get things perfect to avoid other people's judgments and their criticism. So it's like this innate program that kicks in. It's like, I don't want to be shamed. I don't want to be criticized. So this fear of judgment actually creates burnout and other health problems. So thinking back to when you were a child, like what was expected upon you? Did you have to fight to get it right? Did you have to show up to make sure that you weren't judged and criticized? Like what was going on for you when you were little? We received so many harsh judgments growing up from our parents, our caregivers, other kids in the schoolyard. And while they did the best that they could, their judgments and conditions were learnt from their childhood and their caretaker's childhood and their caretaker's childhood, like the judgments and the expectations and the shame that can be put on us can actually be from ancestral, from our soul's lineage, or sorry, from our family lineage, more than what's realistic in this day and age. So collectively, when you're feeling that pang of judgment, it can come with such an enormous amount of tidal wave kind of energy from so many generations. what people don't realize is that this experience of judgment puts our walls and our barriers up. It's like this level of protection that goes up. And so if we are completely encased in that wall, that barrier, that we don't actually show up in the world in our true sense, in our true alignment, because we've stopped trusting ourselves, we've shut ourselves down. And so again, that's how the judgment stops us from creating the success in the future. It also stops us from receiving the joy and the kindness from people who don't have those judgments. So, either way, this pattern that has established from childhood is holding you back no matter what you do. It's holding you back from receiving the love that you deserve, and it stops you from achieving that success. So, if this is happening, I would definitely do some self-inquiry. And to do this type of self-inquiry, you need to be at cause, which means that you need to come from a place of responsibility about what it means for you if you take responsibility for your thoughts, responsibility for your reactions, responsibility to just sort of stand back and observe rather than remaining in that effect energy where you believe that you're at the effect of other people's, you're at the mercy of other people, you're at the effect blaming, wanting the world outside of you to change so that you can change. The change has to come from within before you see the changes without, or the outer world, I should say. So, as an adult now, you have that safety to be able to drop the walls and barriers. Your survival isn't dependent upon other people like you were when you were little. And so you do have that freedom to inquire. And it is about being aware of that first trigger of when that pang of judgment first comes in. If I'm noticing that sense of judgment, immediately I will come back to a quote known from Access Consciousness to say, isn't that an interesting point of view that I have that point of view? The minute that somebody makes a judgment on me and I feel it, like I'm reacting to it, I'm judging them for being wrong before judging me. So I've very quickly dropped my frequency and gone into that spiral of judgment. So being able to quickly state an interesting point of view that I have that point of view, and maybe even repeating that to lift myself out of that energy is one of the very first things that I will do when I notice myself being triggered by judgment. Now, the other self inquiry that you can do is you can say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, how much do you believe other people's judgments are impacting you? Now, you're most likely going to get a high score if you're working on judgment. But the question then goes to if the impact of other people's judgments was at a 1, what difference would it make? So if working with a client who has a fear of being seen for what they do as a wellness professional, holding themselves back, worried about what people will think, it wasn't the academic career that her father wanted her to do, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, how much is that fear of judgment of being seen holding her back? And of course, that's like at a 9 or a 10. And if the weight wasn't put on to what dad wants, if we didn't actually care what dad wanted or living up to his standards, and that judgment, that fear of judgment was at a 1, it was like, well, I respect that you have that opinion, dad, but it's not going to stop me from what I'm doing. What difference would that make? How would you show up? Would you show up more on your social media? Would you create that business of your dreams? Would you speak more about people's health? Would you would you dive into really fascinating conversations with people that are waiting to learn from you? Like, if we can bring that fear of judgment down, what difference would that make? Like, it's so crazy to think that we hold ourselves back because of some other person's judgment. So, checking in with yourself, if you're feeling that pang of judgment, what emotional button did they push? Was it fear? Was it anger, insecurity, powerlessness? And if they've pushed that fear of like, well, I won't belong to the family if I go against what dad wants, it's like, where else in your life are you feeling this kind of judgment and limitation? Like, where else are you feeling that fear of not being included? Where else are you fearing being left alone? What is going on there? Because the law of attraction is inclusive, which means that if you have that fear, that fear of being alone, then you're going to unconsciously attract in more evidence on why you're right, more evidence on being alone, and more evidence on why you need to have those walls and barriers around you because the outside world is so judgy that it's just better to be alone. The thing is, like, you've literally like dropped your energy into the stuckness and the heaviness of other people's negativity, and of like, well, of course, if that's what you believe to be true, that's what you're going to see. So I want to start again. I want to talk about judgment and how that comes into place with the spirit world. So, hey, going from human coaching more into the spirit world, I strongly believe that before we came into these bodies, before we came to Earth, we were part of a soul family. And that doesn't necessarily mean blood related, but it's these group of souls that follow each other as part of that soul tribe that go from one lifetime to another. Now, before we come into these bodies, we're at like a contract table, and somebody may bring up their contract and say, okay, this lifetime I want to come in, I want to learn about patience. And other souls in that at that soul table will say, okay, well, I want to come in as the boss or the messy little brother or the ex-husband, and I'm going to teach you patience through impatience. And again, in the spirit world where there's just that love, that joy, that happiness, like, oh, cool, let's let's do that. And of course, when we move through that veil of amnesia and we come to this world and we're here, and it's like, this dense planet is so heavy. And it's like, wow, okay, I'm learning about patience through impatience. What we do know about Earth is that it is a school where we get to experience things that we don't have in the spirit world. In the spirit world, we have love, joy, happiness, high vibe energy. And then for our soul's growth, seeing that Earth has things like time and polarity and all sorts of things that we don't have in the spirit world, we get excited to come here. We don't realize that being here is so dense. The judgment of what's right, what's wrong, dark, light, love, hate. In the spirit world, when we sign up to be here, it's like, oh, cool, let's experience that. Just like being at a buffet, like, oh, it sounds exciting. But actually, being here in this 3D reality, experiencing the polarities that we just don't have in the spirit world, means that when we get enmeshed in other people's judgments, we are completely enmeshing ourselves in that polarity, in the right and the wrong. And it is going to feel heavy, especially to a high vibrational soul. So while it's an honor to be here, unfortunately, we don't actually remember these soul contracts logically. And so we really do feel that pang of other people's judgments. In the human body, we actually become kind of addicted to the drama and the polarity. And so we get caught up in measuring what's good, what's bad, love, hate, right, wrong. As an infinite being, that's part of our purpose is to experience that. But once we've experienced it, the soul's growth is also coming back to that sacred neutral to raise your standard above the stuckness and the heaviness of the polarities. Anytime we entangle ourselves in the judgment, we literally solidify our energy. We go from the high vibe spirit world to the dense 3D, the right or wrong, the polarity, and we solidify our energy. And so it's any wonder why we feel stuck, heavy, drained by other people's judgments. We're literally getting entangled in that dense energy. So if you think about an area of your life where you may have been judged, then notice how your body and your mind experience that charge or that density. Even like when I'm writing this and talking about this, I can feel feel the weight on my shoulders. And it's this charge and this heaviness that actually stops us from having an awareness of a different point of view. So when you're triggered into judgment, we go straight into the fight or flight mode and we get stuck believing that in this kind of response that the other person must be true or that you might be wrong or there's all of this confusion. So if you're finding yourself in that sense of judgment, you want to find a way to get out of that stuckness and out of that heaviness and coming back to observing what's going on. Questions that may sound a little bit odd to ask are things like, what's good about this judgment? Okay, so what's good about this judgment? Dad has a judgment on me being seen for being a wellness professional or something like that as like client's experience. And it's like, what's good about that judgment? Well, it's good that dad is protective. It's good that dad cares. You know, you could expand on that and say, well, it's good that dad cares, but maybe we could take on his caring in a different, different way. You may want to have a look at what is going on for the judger to have that perspective. Again, for that scenario, maybe dad was burnt when he put himself out there, and so he is being protective, or maybe he, lived a very academic, safe, in society's framework anyway, that safe experience of the world. And so he hasn't actually experienced the charge of living his purpose. He's gone down the avenue of safety. What choices is the judge making in their life that would limit their point of view? And it's not so much saying, like, well, he's jealous that you get to be out there being seen for doing what you love, but like, what is going on for their generation? Do they understand what it means to do kinesiology or NLP? Like, what's actually going on that would limit their point of view? And so, to soften your energy, we need to be mindful and to just recognize what would this life be like in this present moment without the judgment. It means that we have to go back to that observer's position to have a look at what's going on. Isn't it interesting that I have that point of view kind of space? When it comes to moving forward, the number one thing that you need to be clear on is what is it that you want? Again, with that client example, do you want some time and space to cool down? Do you want to communicate the hurt with the other person who judged you? How do you want to be treated? What are your boundaries? Meaning, like, what's okay within the invisible line of who you are? Like, what's okay to bring in, and what is not okay? What are you not going to tolerate? The healing process does take time. However, it's going to be so much easier to move through the pain of judgment when you actually know what you want to move towards. I want to talk about how when you actually go do the healing experience and work out, okay, what does that mean for me? What fears does it bring up? What happens is that you actually start to raise your frequency. And what I mean by that is that if you have brought yourself down into the fear, the heaviness, the density, the stuckness, you're down there at that energetic vibration where people can push your buttons because they're also down at that level. The minute that you raise your frequency, you're not there for them to push your buttons anymore. So you don't attract those people into your world. In fact, you raise your frequency to people who are a bit more curious and compassionate and excited to talk to another person who isn't in that victim kind of stuck energy. Is like, oh, what's possible? How can we play? How can I show up for you? So there's a lot there that I've thrown in your direction, but clearing any kind of fear setbacks from judgment does raise your frequency, and it does mean that your buttons aren't there to be pushed anymore. The last thing that I want to offer you here is once you've moved through the difficulties, the challenges, the hardship of being judged, and recognizing that that soul has brought forward a mirror for you to actually work through to a sense of empowerment, to actually recognize that that soul has been a mirror for where you're judging yourself possibly or holding yourself back. Once you've done that work and you recognize the learnings, it's worthwhile doing a forgiveness letter. And this is something that we're not going to post to the other person, but this process actually does clear the energy out of your aura and out of your energy field. So letting go of the anger, the blame, letting go of the triggers that you've held on to for years, it may actually be a bit of a process to go through. But forgiving the other person doesn't mean that they were right or they're wrong, because we're not getting caught up in that judgment. It doesn't justify what they're doing, but it does mean that we're going to release the pent up energy, and we're going to bring in more understanding so that you can actually avoid that scenario in the future. You're also going to be able to lift up your frequency so that you can start to heal, because things like anger, resentment, it is going to decline your energy field, deteriorate your immune system. So you want to actually do this work so that their toxic judgment doesn't linger and pull you down. So, so you can even do this process to people that you know, or judgments that you've experienced from people who have passed over. The focus is for you and what do you want. So writing that letter is basically saying, like, to dear whoever, I'm feeling really angry because you said that, and because I because, and write out all of your anger. And I'm feeling afraid because, and then to write out all the fears that you haven't been willing to look at. I'm sad because, there's this distrust, or can't, receive your support, and then write out any other sadness there. I love you because, and again, write down any appreciation that you taught me, how important it is to hold on to my dreams, or whatever comes up for you. And I love me because I'm willing to do the work. I love me because I'm so important to myself that I'm invested in doing the healing. And then, write out anything else there that comes to mind. But it's important to burn that letter in a safe way, as this just helps release the energy. It's like you call in your team, you call in your guides. It's like, I'm not holding on to this anymore. Like, any areas in the future where this may show up again, it's like, let's clear and transmute this. Like, I'm releasing this. I'm done with this lesson. Soul to soul, thank you. I'm done. And so, yeah, again, burning that letter, you don't have to post it to them. So if you're still feeling judged and not sure what's holding you back, you may want to find a trusted professional in NLP, coaching, hypnotherapy, theta healing, Reiki. It's pretty much my resume there, and help you to resolve the fear and the resistance that's creating those health problems, that's creating that stuckness, that's stopping you from being able to move forward. Releasing that, like taking the time to invest in yourself and to release that, opens up doorways for your future to be really, really exciting. I hope that helps, guys. It's an interesting topic, right? Judgment. I will talk to you later.